3, 2, 1, punch it.
Could you jump to light speed in that tin can? Go back in time in a DeLorean? Will it crash or take to the sky? Tell me, smart guy, does it fly?
Welcome to Does It Fly, the podcast that puts your favorite sci-fi properties, inventions, and conceits to the test. I'm your mad scientist, Hakeem Oluseyi.
And I'm your pop culture expert, Tamara Krinsky. Time to dive into today's topic and see, does it fly?
Tamara, I heard that you've been out here without me doing interviews.
I mean, you know I love it when we do stuff together, but every once in a while, I gotta go talk to somebody else. And in this case, I couldn't wait for you because I had the opportunity to sit down with the showrunner of Netflix's new anime version of Terminator.
What? Love it.
Yeah, so let's take a look. It was really fun hearing how he went about making this fly. This episode of Does It Fly is presented by Netflix, the exclusive home of the most anticipated anime series of the year, Terminator Zero. From the anime studio that brought you Ghost in the Shell, Terminator Zero stars Timothy Olyphant, Rosario Dawson, Sonoya Mizuno, André Holland, and Ann Dowd in an exciting and apocalyptic new chapter of the Terminator franchise. Terminator Zero is now streaming only on Netflix. Hey everyone, I'm Tamara Krinsky with Does It Fly, the show where we look at the science and story of your favorite franchises. Today, we're actually going to go behind the scenes with Terminator Zero to talk to the creators about what they were thinking about when they wanted to make sure the show would indeed fly. Mattson Tomlin, hello.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I want to start off. This is a storied franchise with lots of fans, including me. When you were thinking about putting it together, what did you take as canon? What were the pieces where you were like, these must be in here or the show just ain't going to fly?
It's a really good question because I think that depending on who you are, where you are, when you are, it is different. And I think that the first thing that was kind of a variable was the fact that this was going to be animated, not just animated, but an anime. Because of that, there's an inherent, it's already different. You know, it isn't a $10 million movie. It's not a $200 million movie. It's not the Sarah Connor Chronicles. It's something that has not been done before in this franchise. I don't think I had ever watched all of the movies straight through before. And so watched every single one, then went back to the beginning and then just started taking notes. And I looked for parallels. I looked for themes that were across all of them, character archetypes, and I found myself really drawn to the first two movies. So I was kind of looking at, what do those movies have in common? Well, first of all, the most important thing is that forget the apocalyptic dreams, forget the killer robots. Those are such a given that it's like it's going to have those. So put those aside for a second. Go beyond that. It for me was the fact that there was a real, incredibly palpable heartbeat to both of those stories that involved parents and children. I found myself going, oh, there's a kind of almost lone wolf and cub thing going on with this franchise that I hadn't really identified before. You look at T1, and Kyle Reese is on this journey to save the world, to try to prevent Judgment Day. He says, he has this great monologue where he's like, time travel, it's one way, it's just me and him and there's no way back. And you go, oh, this guy's sacrificed fucking everything. Why? And then you realize that he has loved Sarah Connor forever and that he has this photo of her that he's kept on him in the future and that this is a love story. And she doesn't even quite wake up to the ramifications of what he's done and why until it's almost too late. And I find that to be extremely, extremely emotional I made a movie called Mother Android a couple of years ago that is also a movie about the apocalypse and robots.
You seem to have a theme going on.
Yeah. There's a couple of overlaps. And that is also a story about parents and children. And so that to me resonated so strongly of, this is a story, T1 is a story about parents coming together, trying to create new life. And then T2, it is a mother-son story, obviously, and kind of most forward, but then also it's a stepfather story. And it is a stepfather story where the stepfather is not only a new guy that's come into his life, but this new guy is also has the face of the villain of the first movie. And I found that to be kind of like, that was the heart. The heart for me was, okay, you have parents, children, families, and then how these cyborgs interact with them and change the family dynamic in very unexpected ways. And, one of the things that to me felt like, why is Terminator 2 so successful? It's one of the greatest action movies of all time. Arnold Schwarzenegger has never looked cooler. Linda Hamilton, like the coolest woman on screen ever, maybe. There's this other aspect for me, which is he was the villain in the first movie. And then suddenly he's become, she has this voiceover. I don't remember if it's in the theatrical cut or the special edition, but she has this voiceover where she's like, I watched the Terminator be more of a father than any of the guys that I ever dated. And he will always show up. Like, he will never hit him. He will never yell at him, and he will be there and protect him, and he will never, ever stop. And it's a subversion of that whole, the Terminator is coming and it's going to kill you and it will never, ever stop until you are dead. It'll rip your fucking heart out through your throat. To take this thing that was the scary thing and then make it this beautiful relationship. That was the other thing for me that felt like this is the X factor. This is what made this franchise something that we're still talking about 40 years later, is just the fact that apocalypse, scary robots, yes, we're doing it. It's fine. But human story about families and then what the relationship is to technology, always inverting, always spinning on its head in subversive ways.
That is why this is one of my dad's and my favorite movies that we watch together. I mean, you hit it on the head, but that's really difficult, right? Because you've got the apocalypse, you've got killer robots, and you're also talking about heart. So as a writer and a showrunner, what were you thinking about as to how to blend those tones and make that fly so that we as fans weren't sitting there kind of being disjointed and being jerked around between different feels?
I think that just kind of comes down to taste, and it just kind of comes down to the internal cadence that I have for storytelling, and just kind of, what do we need to, I start writing the show, and instantly, the first barrier is people are wondering, is this really Terminator? And so you just kind of go in and know you can't start with a scene of the family. You can't start with anything other than like full tilt heavy Terminator action. Like you have to show that you've got the goods. And so just instantly kind of going, okay, so let's make the best Terminator opening scene imaginable. And that was kind of the ambition there. And then from there, it's like you have this opening 7-minute scene and you go, okay, hopefully we've done it. And then where from there? Well, now we've got to learn the characters. Now I'm thinking about the audience and going, okay, if you've bought in for the first 7 minutes and you like the action, you go, yep, that's a Terminator. I recognize this. Then I have to very quickly come in and tell you, okay, but I'm not just thinking about the apocalypse and killer robots. I know you wanted that. I know you were scared that I wasn't going to do it. I'm doing it. Right. So now let's do the family thing. Now let me show you that I care about the same thing that you care about, that maybe you weren't quite articulating, but without one, you didn't want the other. But if you have one and not the other, suddenly you're going, oh, it's not Terminator. So I think that this is a kind of, it's a very specific answer, but just in thinking about the first 15 minutes of the show, it was very clear to me I needed that undeniable Terminator action, and then I needed to instantly shift gears into meet the family, meet the parents and the children that are going to be at the heart of this and the journey that they are about to go on, in which the future and technology is going to come crashing into them in very heartbreaking and upsetting ways, and then go from there.
Well, and we're at a place where we feel like the future and technology is crashing into us. So I'm curious about the themes you were thinking about, because it feels like we're living in this right now, or the beginning of it.
Yeah,
it could be.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've said this a couple of times, but I just find it upsetting. The other day, scrolling on Instagram as one does, and I found this account that was all behind the scenes photos of Daniel Craig on the James Bond movies in outfits that didn't make it into the movie. And I like Daniel Craig. I like his style. I like James Bond. So I'm like looking at these outfits, like trying to figure out where I can buy some of these and going, this is a rad fit. Like look at this one. Look at this. And as I just spend like 10 minutes scrolling through, and then suddenly like my blood just goes cold, and I realize none of these are real. I am not looking at a single fucking photograph of Daniel Craig. These are all like Mid-Journey images. And it was the first time that I had been like completely living in the Matrix. And I found it to be extremely disturbing because a year ago we were laughing going, oh, it doesn't know how many fingers we have. And it's like, it's over. Like it is over. Once you know, like now I'm like, okay, like look at the skin tones. Like is the flesh just like a little bit off? Like I'm looking for hints that are not. So that's the image part of it. But then also, you know, like Eminem's coming out with a new album, and then meanwhile, like there's all of this AI Eminem, like people trying to make Eminem Kendrick beef started on YouTube, and just kind of going, wait, what's real anymore? And our media literacy is just in the toilet, and so there is for me this kind of thing of, oh, I'm waiting for there to be a video that comes out of an actor I'm working with or with me saying a bunch of crazy shit, and then going, I didn't say that, but like. You can't put that genie back in the bottle. And that's just kind of the base layer of the scariness that we're in. And I think it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, and it's kind of what makes it the perfect time for this show. You know, we talked about the things that you felt you needed to keep to make sure that it felt like Terminator. You already mentioned animation, which is one difference. And I'm curious what that allowed you to bring to it and just, you know, some of the other changes you made. You talked about the family a little bit too. So,
you know, I think that the first thing was that I really wanted to set it in 1997. You know, August 29th, 1997 is a big date in the franchise. And knowing that I was going to set it during the week of Judgment Day, that just felt narratively like a really taut, tense choice to make because it gives you a very real clock. And,
oh, yeah.
and one of the lead characters, Malcolm Lee, he's trying to launch a new AI that is kind of the answer to Skynet. And he is engaging in these sequences that are kind of like Ex Machina in that it's conversations with an AI. And he has this philosophy that, you know, where Cyberdyne went wrong is by programming an AI and trying to tell it how to think and what to feel. And he is trying a kind of more holistic approach of, I'm going to give this AI language and all of the tools to communicate, but I'm not going to tell it what to think or how to be. And instead, I'm going to teach this AI about humanity through observation and through conversation.
I'm curious, as you were putting that piece of it together, did you do any research? Did you talk to scientists, you know, so that we would watch this and say, yeah, this flies, this works for us?
Yeah, probably not to the degree that the PhD guy was going to be happy with me. But definitely a lot of reading about like Turing tests today and about, you know, what the abilities are and it's kind of one of those things where as far as we know and what the public facing information is, we're not quite there yet. But in the same way that you look at the images and in the last year it's gone from they don't know how many fingers we have into I'm getting fooled by Daniel Craig photos. I think that the jumps are exponential. And so there was still a level of invention and a level of, it's a sci-fi show, so you've got to make some stuff up, but also making sure that it never felt like it was fully beyond the bounds of what's actually happening out there today.
And then when you were thinking about the look and feel of the show, let's talk about some of the production elements and what was important to you there.
Yeah, I mean, so it was kind of crazy collaborating with Production IG just because, you know, they're in Japan, I'm here. The scripts I wrote in English and then they get translated into Japanese. And so we would have these meetings where they would ask questions and I'd go, what is this question? What's going on? And then realize that something had been translated in a way that was a little too literal because I was writing in metaphor. And so then we'd have to go, oh, we were saying this instead. And then everybody laughs. And
I think that trying to translate development execs notes, it's something that's universal no matter what language you're speaking in.
Sure. Yeah, that's good. But it was kind of great because I would write the scripts, and then for every single script, I would send over a lookbook that was full of images and some more writing that was just kind of, here's the kind of location that I'm picturing. This is what I think this character should kind of look like. Here's the vibe. Here's the color. And so it was a process that I do when I'm directing. I did not direct this show. Director Kudo did, but I wanted to arm them with as much of what was in my head as possible. And the thing that I said to them was, look, this is not a prescriptive. This is simply, I want you to have all of the tools, and I want you to get as close in here as you possibly can. And because we can't have a conversation because you don't speak English and I don't speak Japanese, and so we're always talking through translators, let me use image as much as possible, because then at least we'll look at it and go, okay, yes, we're seeing the same thing, even if we're not necessarily saying the same thing with the exact same slant. And that was the jumping off point. And then from there, it was them. And, any time that I felt like, oh, I'm not Japanese, like, what, like, is this going to feel Japanese? I would always remind myself, well, everybody else that's making the show is Japanese. And so
Yeah.
like I can write a street corner and I don't have to try to paint it as a Japanese street corner, because they are going to do that. And they sure did. And so I think that for me, it was just a matter of making sure that the story that was being told was always pointed in the right direction. And that once we declared what the North Star was, that we were always pointed towards that, giving them as much detail and as much of what was in my head as possible, and then backing off and saying, okay, you guys know what you're doing. Let me get the fuck out of your way.
I love the idea that you used visuals to communicate when you couldn't communicate with words. I'm also curious about sound, because the sound design in this is amazing. Was that, and it really does help the show fly and help us believe, especially around when the Terminators appear. I mean, when the Terminator appears. So was that something that you talked about or communicated with them about, or was that something that came back to you and you saw?
Yeah, no, we talked about it just in terms of, and same thing with the sound and also the performances, where, the thing that I said is like, look, this is an anime, but like let's approach this like a movie. And, every so often the physics is going to lift off into anime, but a lot of the time we want the physics to feel grounded and real. And so if the physics is going to feel grounded and real, we want the sound to also feel grounded and real. We want the character performances to feel grounded and real. So we want to, where sometimes in an anime, a performance may be very big and eyes may get wide and like people falling out of their chairs. It's like, let's take all of that down a notch. And maybe that will happen in moments if we're trying to have a moment of comedy, but it's not going to be the baseline. And same thing with the sound. So a lot of that just came to me and was kind of perfect because those guys know what they were doing. And then on the flip side of it, the score was done in the States. The score was done by my dear friends, Kevin Henthorne and Michelle Bursky, who I worked with on Mother Android. And they did the score, and I would go into their studio and they'd show me what they were doing and I'd give them notes, and then we'd come back to Japan, and that was again kind of doing a collaborative process of a divide and conquer.
And then I want to pull out a second because, we've been talking about anime. Why ultimately was the decision made to do this as an anime piece?
It wasn't my decision. It's something that was inherent to bringing me in. And, from my understanding, it isn't just, that's a good piece of business. It isn't just, like Netflix is big in Japan. I think that it was like those things are there, and like let's not fool ourselves, like that's part of it, like this is a business. But I think that also from a creative standpoint, you're just able to do things that haven't been done before, because if you're making a movie, and a movie that's in a franchise like Terminator, then there are certain expectations, certain beats that it has to hit, and those movies are $100-200 million movies. And so $100 or $200 million movie, it's going to be a certain kind of thing. And this isn't that. And not only is it not just it's animated, but it's an anime. And so it creates these variables into the equation that I think inherently make you go, oh, this is going to make something that maybe feels old feel completely new again. It's an opportunity to kind of breathe a lot of new life into it just by the fact that so many of the it is not an Arnold Schwarzenegger story. And, there's really only one Terminator movie that has the Christian Bale one that comes close to not being an Arnold Schwarzenegger story, and even that he shows up in the last 15 minutes, and so that's a scary thing to do. It's kind of a dangerous thing to do because I think that he is the face of the franchise, and so on a certain level you're going, okay, like we're getting a face change here, but you're already getting a face change because it's animated. And so I found myself going, do people really want to see an animated Arnold Schwarzenegger? I think some do, sure. And I think that that's totally valid. But I think that there was also just an opportunity to go, okay, well, think about the story, because Terminators are supposed to be infiltrators. And so if you have this Anglo guy walking around in Tokyo, like, he's not blending in anywhere.
No, especially not in 1997.
Yeah. And so, again, it was kind of driven by story and an opportunity to just do something the franchise hadn't done before.
Well, I've got one last question for you. So we talk a lot on our show about what makes things fly for the fans. My question is, for you, when was the moment during production that you, as a writer, as a showrunner, felt like, yeah, this thing has wings, this thing can fly? Was it when you got an animatic? Was it when you first saw, the image, the animated image of the eye, which is such a great callback to the original? Yeah. Was it on the scoring stage?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of different answers to that, because it comes in stages. Because even now, I feel really proud of the show. I think that it rocks. But also, like, it could come out and people could go, yeah, I prefer the movies. That's
any art you put out into the world.
Exactly. So there's a level of it that will be kind of out of my hands. But I think that there are stages that you go, and you get to a certain stage and you go, okay, like, it's still looking good. Like, we're not off the reservation yet. And
right.
For me, the first time that happened was while I was writing, and I got through episode 4. Once I started writing episode 5, and it's like, oh, now the plane has taken off, and now we're at altitude, and now actually I have to think about landing. And so now having these 4 episodes, and I can read that 100 or so pages and go, I stand by this. Like, this is working. Now I just need to land the plane. And it's not that I felt like, oh, I've got this, but I felt like there was enough material that I could go, okay, there's a story that is being told now that feels worth telling. So that was kind of the first time. The second time was definitely once art started to come in from production IG, and seeing at the level at which they were executing and going, oh, they're going to kill this. This is going to look beautifully. I think then the third time was certainly working on the score and working with Kevin and Michelle and finding a sonic identity for the score that felt like Terminator and at the same time does its own thing. Like, we didn't just want to be playing the same stuff. Like, it needed to feel inherently of its own. And then the last one is kind of now. We're currently, like, finishing up recording the voices and recording the American actors, and some of the cast members that we've got are geniuses. Like they're so good. And
are you allowed to tell us?
Nope.
Had to ask. It's my job to ask.
Yeah, totally. It'll come soon. But some of the work that they're doing, and just particularly with Kokoro, that character, she's an AI. And that dialogue is not easy to say. It's like, people don't speak like that. And so then to have a human being in the booth who then is looking at this wall of text and going, I got to rock this, and then seeing this actor do that, and then just kind of going, oh, we're going to be totally fine. Like, it's very, very rad to see.
Very cool. Well, I cannot wait for this to birth itself to the world. Thank you so much for talking with Does It Fly?
Thanks for having me.